you want to have this feeling in your program like, well, they're supposed to do that and they're doing it, so I'm just gonna act like they're supposed to do that. I think you can get into a cycle where you're not rewarding and acknowledging those things, but yet we're the same people as coaches that are always talking about the little things. So if they're doing the little things and we're saying that they're important, we need to do a better job of acknowledging it. And I'm like, guilty as charged over here. I think that's something that I recognize too much after practice, where I
Mm.
would like to recognize it more before. And I think that's what having great assistant coaches is huge.
Welcome to the Jamodi Podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it. Today we're joined by the head men's basketball coach at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, Chris Bartley. Coach Bartley has been the head coach at WPI since 2001. He holds a career record of 437 wins and 162 losses, ranking him among the top 15 all-time in Division III winning percentage. Under his leadership, WPI has made 14 NCAA tournament appearances, including 3 Sweet 16s and an Elite 8 run in 2022. Coach Bartley has guided the Engineers to 12 NEWMAC regular season titles. He is a 7-time NEWMAC Coach of the Year and was named the Glenn Robinson D3 National Coach of the Year in 2013. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at Jamodi Podcast. Coaches, the Jamodi Podcast is powered by Scoreboard Media. Scoreboard Media works with high schools across the country to run professional sponsorship programs on their LED scoreboards. Whether you already have LED and you just want to supercharge the revenue, or you want to use sponsorship revenue to buy new LED video scoreboards, Scoreboard Media can help. They work with sponsors and advertisers locally, regionally, and nationally who want to connect with your school's community. Email info@scoreboardmedia.com to start the conversation and see what's possible. Well, Coach, I first want to thank you so much for giving up your time, coming on here, talking hoops with me. I had the pleasure of getting to be out on your campus about over a month ago now, but love the campus. But I was really blown away just listening to you, and the fact that there are coaches out there like you across the country, man, it makes me feel really good and something to aspire to. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Matt. I'm excited to spend some time with you.
Man, love the background. That gym that you have is pretty special. And 24 years at the same school, man, that's really impressive.
Yeah, it's been a fun ride for me for sure. I started out as a, church league basketball coach, coached JV basketball, made it to be like a varsity assistant in high school, and I thought I had won the lottery just doing that when I got my first $800 check. I was running around my house, but I just kept progressing and kept trying to grind and plug away and learn more about the game. I I wish I was a better like networker, and try to tell young coaches that now. I think it's like really important. I was more of a put my head down and just work, and maybe I would impress one person. And I
Mm.
finally got a chance to be a volunteer coach in college at a small Division III in Boston at Wentworth. And you know, uh, that was a great experience. I learned a ton about small college basketball from Harry McShane, who was the coach there, and very much similar to here. It was a true rebuild. Wentworth was like 2-23 the year before, and the year before I got to WPI, the program had lost 27 straight games. So I was like, I've been there, done that. I just haven't done that
Yeah.
as a head coach. So it was a journey. Then once you find, I think, like you're experiencing at Faith, I think if you find a good place, I've never felt like the grass is always greener. I've
Mm.
always been a, person who felt like I wanted to build something special and try to sustain it.
Man, I really appreciate you saying that because, yeah, this is year 12 for me here. And there have been times, especially about 3 or 4 years ago, I think COVID messed with everybody. You started questioning things and is this where God really wants me to be? I had a coach come talk shooting with me one time, and he wasn't being mean, but he just said, like, Matt, why are you hiding here? And I kind of like jumped back a little bit. I was like, what do you mean by that? He's like, we are at a smaller place. But I think
there is something about what you said about the grass being greener. And I think of like what Boeheim always said, like, why would I
Mm.
leave? Why would he leave there? Like, why would you leave where you're at? Why would I leave Faith? I love the kids that I have. I've never felt led to go somewhere else. But that comparison thief, right? The comparison is the thief of all joy of what other coaches are getting to do, the facilities that they have, the players that they get to flow with or run any system with.
Yeah.
There's always that idea, but when I hear someone like you say that you've been there, you've been faithful, I think I could be that.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I think one of the questions, was on the list of questions was, if you had something to do over, what would you do? And I honestly think like, as a coach, you're so driven to succeed, and you want to win, very badly, and you want all your players to develop. But I think if I had to do one thing over, I would say it would be like not compare myself to other people, because we all have different jobs and unique jobs, and some jobs are really hard, and maybe from the outset somebody from the outside somebody thinks another job is easier, but I'm sure
Yep.
that's got its challenges too. So I always felt like every place has its challenges and every job has its challenges. But be where your feet are, and really like dive into the guys, the dudes that are in your program. Those are most important people. And if you just continually do that, year after year, and you're finding the challenges within the job that you already have, to me, the only time to leave a job that's a good job is if you're not being challenged, and I feel like
Yep.
every year is a challenge. And that's what, has really kept me, I think, at WPI for a long time.
Man, you're right on the money. Shawnee Harley episode I did over a year ago, she was the Olympic coach for the Canadian women's team, and she runs a group called a program called Winning Matters now. And I literally just saw a video last night on her Facebook page that just a 1 minute, and it was quitting versus leaving. And she says, when you quit, it's because you lack the resolve to fight through something difficult. You're running away from a challenge that you just don't want to face. But when you leave, you may be leaving a place where you can't put up with this crap anymore. It's such a toxic environment. The mountains and what's holding you back are too high. Some people may have an issue with differentiating between which one they're doing, but there is a difference between quitting and leaving. And I like you, there are challenges at every place, and that's one thing we got to remember is like we don't know what that coach B down the street what they're going through every day, but ultimately making the like, am I feeling fulfilled here? Am I pouring into these men's lives and I'm making a difference, even though we might not see that now? But coach, that difference between quitting and leaving, I got to imagine in college basketball, that's that's a big difference.
It's very interesting. I think the jobs, small college jobs and high school jobs. I was a JV coach. And I put as much pressure on myself as a JV coach as I do as a college coach. I honestly don't think there's much difference. Having coached, everywhere from church league to college, I had a great experience when I was a young high school coach. I coached in this thing called the Boston Pro-Am League, and it was a collection of like there'd be a few like NBA guys that were around for the summer that were kind of coming in and out, and they wouldn't be there the whole summer. They would just be there a few times. And then you had a lot of, Division I college guys, and you had some European pro guys. And it was really cool. It was put together by this guy named Kevin O'Brien, who was an assistant at Harvard at the time. We
Hmm.
played at Boston College. I was an assistant one year, and I was a head coach another year. And the reason they had high school coaches coach it was because the college coaches weren't allowed to, at that time. And what I learned, it was great. It was very, it really boosted my confidence as a coach, because I realized all the stuff that I was teaching and coaching to these like amazing players were the same things I was doing to my JV and varsity high school kids. It's basketball is basketball,
Yeah.
you know. And sure, like at that level and at our level, like there's just more people that can score, you know, on the court. Maybe in high school, when I was a high school coach, if you shut down those top two guys, you were in good shape. Here now, you know, there's probably five guys on the floor a lot that can fill it. You know, that's probably the only difference, I think. But all of the basketball is the same.
Yeah.
But you know, and that's what I don't, you know, I don't think it's like it's not like if you're at Division 1 in college basketball, it's like a different game than it is at Division 3 or it is at high school. It's basketball. Playing good basketball is playing good basketball.
I think it's a great reminder for all of us, regardless of the level, whether you're a junior high coach or varsity assistant in some type of at some level in college, is we just need to become great teachers. We need to continue to have a growth mindset and
Yeah.
be open minded to learning new ways of doing things. And but you're right. I think the differences aren't like we're working on a ball screen read today and just maybe kind of being back or down, forcing a little bit of more of that mid range, not giving up the roll, not giving up a three. But I think one of the major differences as you go up the levels is the mistakes are magnified because the other side can do more and more with the mistakes that you make. But
Yeah.
no, I think you're right on the money.
It was also a funny story about that is so this was at the time when like Dominique Wilkins was like in Boston and he was like wavering if he was coming back or something. I can't remember all the details, but I think he ended up going to Italy at some point.
Yeah,
But he
overseas.
was
Yeah,
back, and I think he was probably around 37 to 38. And I mean, I don't remember how old I was, but I was in my 20s. And you know, he was on my team when on the first game or so, and like he would not. He just was like, you know, he was at that age where he was, you know, he was just getting a little run in and just getting loose and just kind of like. So I remember like one of the first timeouts, I said to him, I'm like, "Hey, Neek," I'm like, he's like, "Yeah, coach." I'm like, "You plan on like getting back on defense at all?" Like, so he's like, "Oh, coach, these old legs, man, they take me some time to get going." So it was really funny. Like, you know, you play like in that league, you played like the first like week or two games or something, and then you could kind of flip things and make trades. You know, who was going to be in town, who's going to be out of town. And so I was like, I ended up like not really, but semi like trading Dominique Wilkins. So that's one of my claim to fames as a
that's
GM. I
right.
traded Dominique. I'm like, oh, you guys need a big guy? Oh, that's okay, you know. But the larger point was like, you know what it takes to win, you know, like, and you know, he was a great guy. He was a lot of fun, but you know, he wasn't necessarily going to be around, and he wasn't necessarily interested in getting back on defense. I'd rather take like the low D1 guy that's going to work their tail off, you know. So you know, it
Coach,
kind of puts it in
the
perspective.
stone's on you to let Dominique Wilkins go as a 20-year-old coach. That's incredible.
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun.
Man, did you always know that you wanted to be a college coach when you were in the high school world, or was it just
Yeah,
kind of something that opportunity opened and you went there?
I always wanted to coach. I thought I would be like, you know, a high school teacher and coach. And then as I got to like be in that world a little bit, I saw that, you know, some of the teachers were like really burnt out and, you know, doing the two. And then I was always like, wow, like if you could ever make basketball like your
You're full
gig, you know,
time.
your
Yeah,
primary thing.
yeah,
You know, and I do other stuff here, you know, some administrative stuff, but you know, primarily I'm a basketball coach. So, you know, it's really a dream, you know, it's a dream come true to, you know, have this type of job. And, you know, everything has its challenges for sure, but you know, there is something, there was always something in me to be, you know, a coach, even when I was a kid. So it's nice that it worked out because so many people don't know what they want to be, you know, and
yeah.
people struggle with that. And I always had like some clarity with that.
I think kind of to finish up this part of the talk that we've had is I wrote down John Wooden's definition of success because I think that's really important for a coach, regardless of the level they're at or the team that they have or the wins and losses for that year. You know, success is having peace of mind, knowing that you've done your very, very best. And sometimes when I hear that quote and you think of who that came from, you're like, well, no crap. John Wooden said that he won 10 straight, like they undefeated sometimes. But before that, It took him 14 years to ever do that, and he actually had some bad seasons. And he, starting out, but that coach, that seems like maybe the secret sauce to being fulfilled and being where your feet are, being present, like you said, is truly believing in that definition of success.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because like I said before, I think, so much of our identity as people sometimes is about the success of our team. And like, we've won, you know, 12 league championships, 4 conference tournament championships, been to the NCAAs, a ton, and won a lot of games here. But you're never really satisfied, and maybe other people are like, oh, you should have gone further. Or, we were in the Elite Eight a couple years ago, and we ran into Randolph-Macon, and it was, one of those seasons where I think you say to yourself, like we really went as far as we could. We did everything we could. And I think there's a lot of coaches out there that need not beat themselves up about their season, because maybe you took your team as far as they could go. Maybe you made the most of what you had. And ultimately, that's, what it's all about. I think is trying to squeeze as much as you can out of your team.
Man, thank you for sharing that. And I know I needed to hear that. There's been years, especially since doing this thing, and I don't know how many people listen. I'm honored to get to have this time with you, and I look at it as a little bit of professional development. I get guys like you that are just stuck with me for a certain amount of time. I get to ask all those questions. But the last 2 years ago, last season, we were playing in a tournament in Lubbock, and it was our last game out of a five game tournament, which that fifth game, you're always wondering, like, why did we do this? Like, why are we still here? And we were up big at half, and we just completely imploded the second half. And we lost that game, and the other team was young, and it was one of those drives home. You got a 5-hour drive home from Lubbock to DFW. And
That's a lot of raisinets, Matt.
That's a lot, Coach. Coach knows that wow, that's incredible that the Raisinets are my go-to, my candy. And I've got to stay away from those this year. But on that trip home, the thoughts in your head of like, can I do this? Like, am I good enough for these kids? But then having this platform, I start to think like, who am I to talk to anybody about anything? And a lot of this is me just learning from you, but I do sometimes share my ideas, and maybe people fast forward through during that time. But it's like that the twin thieves are the fear of failure and the fear of judgment. And I don't care how long you do this, you have to continuously fight that. Remember what your why is. But what you just said a second ago about not beating ourselves up, every coach needs to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, you've been coaching for a long time. I'm not calling you old. It's seasoned.
That's right.
But with all your experience, you've been around a lot of great coaches and great leaders, and probably even seen some players that have certain characteristics. What are those characteristics that just make a great coach?
Yeah, and being in New England too, we've had some great coaches out in this area, and all different personalities. So I think first and foremost, when I, think of like the great coaches that I admire and, try to, aspire to be, I think first, what I notice about teachers is coaches are they're great teachers. I think you really have to be a great teacher to be a great coach. And, part of teaching obviously is, being able to communicate, I think, but, and being yourself, communicating, in a natural way for yourself. And I think those two go hand in hand, teaching and communicating, because, sometimes, I like to, use humor sometimes. Other times I'm really like, intense and, stern about like what we're doing. And I think part of communication is like listening and having a feel for what that player or what your team needs that day. And within your personality, trying to bring that to the table. So, those two things are big to me. And then I think another thing I really notice about, you know, great coaches, is they have this ability to like simplify,
Hmm.
you know. My father used to say to me, keep it simple, stupid, and and I grew up in a restaurant business. My family owned a restaurant, Mr. Bartley's Burger Cottage, for years and years, and I grew up in that environment. And small business, fast paced, and he wanted to be great at one thing, and it's like we're going to be the best, make the best hamburgers, anywhere around. And slowly but surely he adds things to the menu, but his thing was like, simplify, which if you simplify, it makes it easier to problem solve, and I think those things I see in really good coaches is they can keep it simple and they can problem solve without getting like out of whack, because this thing is, basketball goes so fast and there's so many
Yeah.
things that pop up during the season. And I think a big part of our job as coaches is problem solving and, having the like feel on how to do that. I think the really good coaches have that.
Love that list. And going back to the great teachers part, I think, yeah, great call on the communication piece. That's where I always felt like when I was at McKinney High School and actually in the classroom now at Faith, I am the AP Silent Study Hall teacher. So I don't consider that really a class or me teaching. But when I was at McKinney, they never evaluated me on the court. They always evaluated me in the classroom. And I used to joke with my assistant principal, like, listen, if you really want to see me teach and you want to see authentic
Yeah.
engagement and different modes of learning, come to the court, come to athletic period. They never took
Yeah.
me up on that. But I do think we need to be great teachers, communicators. And I think you hit on something about being yourself. That doesn't mean that we don't grow and learn how other people are doing things. But I think what players can really feel or sense is a phony. Somebody that is trying to do something. Gannon Baker said you can't coach what you don't possess. That
Mm.
doesn't mean you give up on possessing some of those good traits, but you learn them, you do experiment, but you ultimately, like you said, you stay yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a great gift that players can give a coach. I think we always talk about, what the coach can give to the player, but I talk to our guys about like we're in this thing together, and you know, I'm gonna be my authentic self, and it's not always gonna be perfect, and you're going to be yourself and it's not always going to be perfect, but we got to let each other, be ourselves. And like you said, like we're always trying to grow and develop. I think to stay in the business for a long time and, you're going to deal with like sort of different, societal things. And, but I think, that flexibility is really important in a coach, but ultimately, we all have like our sort of core values and who we are as a person. And I think as coaches, we're trying to impart that to our teams. But I remember saying to one team I had a couple years ago, I just want in the last game in the locker room, I was like, I want to thank you guys for letting us be ourselves as coaches,
Hmm.
you know? And I think when you get to that point with a team where, you've got that type of relationship, it's really, really special.
Man, what a great love the comment that you had at the end of the year to that team, and I think that's a great goal for all of us. Is no matter if you're the team that wins the last game or inevitably, most likely, you're like most of us, you'll be the team that loses. But to be able to say that to your team, man, that's a great season, and I think
Yeah.
that's a great goal that we can all try to achieve. That we may not ultimately achieve a winning record or a state championship. But so many times, Coach, you're right. We watch these podcasts where we listen and we learn, and it's all about us getting better. Like, how can I be better for my players? How can I be, like, I have a question that I ask my guys in our 10-minute meeting is, how can I be better for you? Because I do want to know that. And ultimately, I think those kind of questions help me get to the place where I feel like my personality, they know it, they get it, and it's effective. And there is like a comfort and a peace to when you go into the locker room or onto the floor, and you know that you and your team are in sync. But I don't think we talk about the other side of it, which is like, what are the players going to give us? Not just attitude and effort or their very, very best, but that is, I think, maybe it's along the lines of pet peeves that coaches have. Mike Neighbors has a great list of his pet peeves, and he let his players know that at the beginning of the year.
Mhm.
But they can flip it too, and the players get to let him know what their
Yeah.
pet peeves are. I think both are important, but I think that's a question like players need to understand that if this is truly a partnership, they have a part to play. And what are they playing? Like, what do they bring? I think that's valuable.
Yeah, and I think with the older players, at our level, it's like, I think you become like, this you really build a relationship. It starts off, as like the, more typical high school, you're a freshman in college, like, that kind of like high school coach player relationship. And then over time it evolves because, these kids are 21 years old, they're leaders in the program. I think that relationship evolves, into, partnership with the coach. I think especially your best players, like your best players, you got to really be lockstep with and have a partnership with. And it means having some tough conversations, but giving each other the space to like, be true to who you are and having that relationship where you can have those difficult conversations. I think that's what it's all about is, we say around here a lot, it's like, you know, what's the bottom line and what's like, and like, let's cut to the chase and like get to the core root of like this problem and solve it together, and you can't solve everything as a coach. You need your players to help you solve problems.
That's a good point. Josh Stewart from Lodgegrass High School in Montana on the reservation, he had a great point about the phrase faking it till you make it. Fake it till you make it. Fake it till, and I've said it a bunch of times, and he said that's just one of the most damaging things that we can ever tell a player because it's actually promoting them to not be real, not be honest, maybe just to push back past something that they're seeing or feeling. So his response to that was, "We are going to face it until we make it." And that's a kind of a mantra for us that I've tried to adopt here now this year at Faith is we're done with faking things. We're going to face the problems. We're going to lean into tough conversations. We're not going to shy away from being real with each other. Like you said, we're going to cut to the chase. To me, that's facing it. And
Yeah.
so instead of faking it till you make it, we're going to face it from now on. And I think you're right on the money with that.
Yeah. And I think it's like, you know, it gives you courage as a coach. I think there's a lot of coaches, we're afraid, we're walking on eggshells, and I feel that's a big part of, society and
Yep.
coaching. And, relationships with your players, as you build those and they're real, you can have the courage, to have those difficult conversations and, and they can have the conversations with you too. Hey, coach, I think we got to do this more. Or like, why are you letting this slide? Or you've never let that go before. Like, what's up with you? Like that kind of thing. So having that, like breaking down that wall, I think as they get a little bit older in your program is really cool.
Man, you nailed it. I think having conversations from a place of courage versus a place of fear, it has to all come down to the relationship you have with that player. One of my favorite things to do is to find out what their aspirations are. What are their goals? What is driving them? If I know what that is, then that can point me down a direction or path to help motivate them, or at least it gives me a place to set a reminder or to
Yeah.
hold them accountable. But if we don't build the relationships, if we don't know why they're here and what they're trying to do, then we may, I think, out of fear, either sidestepping because I don't know how he's really going to take this, or we're just guessing and hoping that the motivational tool or the reminder or the accountability I'm bringing, this kid will respond to. I don't know about you, coach. I don't want my players to play out of hope. I want them to have clear-cut decisions and choices and good habits. I think sometimes we coach out of hope.
Yeah, you know what? One of the things that resonates with me, and it happens all the time, is when one of our young players will be meeting with, and we did a lot of individual meetings this past week, and the common thing is I'm afraid to make a mistake, and I think that's an area of growth that I still need to take as a coach, and because I it gives me a little like shot right there when I hear somebody say that, because like you don't want players feeling that way, but sometimes we're getting like smart kids that want to please the coach and how we do things, and don't want to get necessarily jumped on when they mess up. So there's like that balance, and I think that if basketball is a game of mistakes,
Yeah.
there's gonna be mistakes. I do think the teams that make the fewest mistakes usually got the best shot at winning, and so there's like a balance there as a coach, like you got to give them space to make some mistakes, but you got to have those like sort of standards and like certain things like you were saying about like Mike Neighbors, like his pet peeves that like, okay, these are a couple that, you, we know you're going to get called out on, every single time. And I think what happens a lot of times is like, I say to my guys all the time, it's like, look it, once we leave the court, it's over,
Mm,
and like that's where I think the humor needs to come into the you can laugh during practice, if something funny happens, you have some fun with it, but if it's been an intense practice and it's been like business kind of approach, it's nice to like as a coach to like let your guard down a little bit and let them know like we're not like holding grudges because you forgot to jump to the ball on that 3-on-3 drill, you know what I mean? Like it's
yeah.
not, we can move past that stuff. So it's interesting, but as they grow, I hopefully in our program the culture is such that players are, coaching players a lot. I'm a big believer in that. Players coaching players. And, so it's not just coming from me. It's not just coming from a coach. It's like players are just teaching players, and it's not like a bad thing if you make a mistake, but you're going to hear it.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up the question or the phrase that some players will say, which is I feel like I'm afraid of making mistakes, or I feel like I'm going to get in trouble when I make a mistake. And we've all heard that. And there's like a choice that we have to make as a coach in that moment. Do I hear this player saying that and immediately just disregard it as that's his problem? Like, come on, I don't create that atmosphere. That's all you, man. Like, you can't think that way. Just, or do you really step back and take it to heart? Is there something that I'm doing or saying, or something non-verbally, facial expressions, physical, that I'm doing that expresses displeasure when the mistake happens, and it's causing that fear or creating that? Coach, I think we can't just immediately go, listen, I'm a great culture guy. I didn't create that atmosphere. That's all on you, man, in your head. But I think that is what happens a lot. It's really easy to just disregard that.
Yeah, no, you gotta, I mean, I own that. Like when a kid says that to me, I own it. And, that's why, I think, a lot of all the information out there, about the growth mindset, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. I love to learn. So I really enjoy, like, I'm listening to your podcast, listening to all these other things. And there's so much information out there. And, I think some of the best information isn't about the X's and O's. It's more about like relationships, leadership, how to deal with issues that prop up, in response,
Yeah.
so like I think a big thing that I've tried to improve on in my career is like my response, because I'm like a fiery guy, like I loved like, well, Pat Summitt's one of my favorite coaches of all time. I absolutely loved Pat Summitt, and she had like that look, that intensity. and I feel like her team's fed off of that,
Yeah.
but she also had this great like balance where she was like very kind and compassionate, I know she was like that off the court from everything I've learned. And I just think she had a really good balance with that. And that's what I think you're trying to get to. You be yourself, you're an intense coach, be an intense coach, be yourself, but also like resonate the compassion and like create a more confident environment with your players. I think is something that we're always trying to evolve and improve at.
Coach, that big motivator for doing this really isn't to learn more out of bounds plays or to learn a new defense or offense. And you and I have actually been able to have, previously some offensive talks, which are really fun to have. But in my opinion, like this is the good stuff.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that if I get time with you, that I really want to learn and know from. And if anybody's ever that has been listening to this has been disappointed with the lack of X's and O's content, it's not that I don't care about that or that I'm so confident or prideful that I don't want to learn anything else. No, I'm always reading and trying to find new ways to do what we're doing. But this is, to me, the good stuff. 10% is what happens to us. 90% is how we respond. And that's the same with players, but also with coaches. And I think a huge nugget that you said, and I didn't want to breeze past it, was that it's over when you get off the court. I think one of the most important things, if every coach could coach their own son, it would be very helpful at some point, or their own kid, or view all of your players as that, because when you do coach your own son and he has done things in a game that are just burning you up inside, you can't take it home. When he's home, you just got to be parent at that point and you got to let it go. The last 2 years, 3 years have helped me with that, but I think you are right. Most kids are pleasers. And most kids, I think, most players want to know that their coach is pleased with them. And after a loss or after a poor individual performance or after a bad practice, I don't think they need more of the hammer. And I think they need more of compassion and more of the arm around and said, hey, can't wait to coach you tomorrow. Something like that. But I thought that was a huge point that you made.
Thank you.
I can't wait for this, standards and pillars of your program. Because again, I love the culture that you've built there. And this is a small thing, but I think for all of us coaches to think about is our locker room, our facilities, and any place where we do have some control over what can be. I think the way that you guys have branded your facilities, you have the goat head, right? Is the goat, right?
Yeah, the GOAT.
Yeah, the goat head
The
is
Tom
all
Brady.
over. That's right, the goat. But the goat head is all over your hallways. The WPI, the color scheme, there's different patterns. Like it, to me, everything there was intentional, and that's a part of culture. For us to think that culture is only words or a T-shirt or a poster or whatever, it's all everything. So, what are those standards and pillars of your program?
Yeah, I mean we have five, but it's alignment, belief, consistency, development, and edge. And hopefully like every one of my players could, repeat that, especially by the end of their freshman year. So the big thing for me is alignment. It's something I talk to our guys and we work on a lot. And it's everyone being on the same page and moving in the same direction and being aligned in our terminology, being aligned as assistant coaches with how we're teaching things, and just every way, shape, or form through our program needs to be alignment. And it's not perfect. You're gonna get off alignment, but if you have that as a North Star, you can pull yourself back into alignment pretty easily, because we are trying to keep things pretty simple, you know. I think the other big thing for us is consistency. I think it's been a hallmark of our program, and we've won 20 more games, I think 17 out of the last 20 years. And that's to me something I'm really proud about because I think it shows that our core values are you know, setting the table, for our success. And what I mean by consistency is, I read a book a long time ago. It was John Chaney's book, and I can't remember the name of it. But he had a thing in there where he called them, I think, called people like cash register guys. And it was like if in a cash register, if you press a seven, you want to get a seven. If you press a nine, you want to get a nine. And I think we are all looking for that in our coaches as players, and we're all looking at for it in our players as coaches.
Hmm.
I know. I think back, my mom, is like, she's a cash register guy. You pray, you press, she's a 10, you press 10, you're going to get a 10 every single day, you
Hmm.
know. And with our players, I think it's like the consistency of like, you know, we don't want guys that are a seven one day and a three the next day and a nine one day and then a two the next day. It's like if you're a seven, be a seven, man, like every day. You know what I mean? And I think that helps, like, I think I was listening to your podcast and you were making the point, and your guest was making the point about the kids that obsess over it, that love it and like it, you know. And I think, everyone's in a different stage. It's great
Yeah.
to get 10 guys that are absolutely obsessed, but maybe you have like valuable players on your team that, love it, but they're not obsessed with it. But like, hey man, you can be like, you be a solid seven for us every day. So being consistent, and I think being consistent as coaches, like in your preparation and how we go about our business, is really like a great like feeling for a player to know what you're
Yep.
getting from your coaches every day.
That's it. And I was so glad that you brought it back to that point because you're right on the money. The players that are up and down, it's hard to ride that roller coaster with them when you don't know, okay, how's Mike today? How's Johnny today? And it's so, there's a peace and comfort that I think walking into the gym of these kids they're cash register players. They're going to be who they are almost every day. But, coach,
Yep.
I don't know if that happens if we're not that way. I played for a guy for my first 3 years that from day to day, we had no clue at Baylor. And so we'd come in, how is he? Like we'd ask the managers who had seen him earlier in the day, what's he like today? Oh, and they go, oh, it's not good.
It's one of those
Like,
things. Yeah.
so whatever we want to see happening in the culture with our players, I gotta believe that we have to do it too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think when I look at, like, you look at good programs, you can kind of see them. You can feel it, when you see them, you just like, oh, those guys, that's a good program. You can kind of tell. Um, and I think one of the reasons you can tell is it could be the simplest thing, but that they're doing could be a warm up, it could be a timeout, it could be, something, small like that, but you can see that they're in lockstep because this is how they do things. This is what they do. And then the biggest thing to us after, the alignment and consistency piece is, I'm a huge believer in what we call edge, and it's like, it's like, you know, do you really have it, or are you just kind of like talking about it, or do you really have it, so it's like there's like another level of competitiveness, I think. There's
Yeah.
another level of preparation, I think. Give yourself an edge. you know um we had a we had a saying, I don't really use it much anymore, but if it kind of resonated with people for a while here, and I know my one of my former assistants uses it, and it's care more.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to care, but can you care that little bit more? And I think that the care more thing is like about that edge that we try to bring to competition, bring it to practice, bring it to everything that we're doing.
I love care more. I think you're right. Like we need to be trying to squeeze just every ounce of care out of our players every single day. That also, again, it always circles back to that extreme ownership that Jocko Willick talks about.
Yeah.
That means we need to care more. That means we don't have an off day. That we have to show up full. We can't show up empty to any practice, any workouts, and we got to pour out for them. But that care more piece, Coach Frosty's book, "Make the Big Time Where You Are." he talks about the edge. There's a coin, but there's two sides to the coin, and that's your performance, either good or bad. But there's a third piece to it. It's the edge. It's the edge of the coin. That's the place that most players can't go to. Do you feel like, from the players you have or you've seen, that athletes know really how to give 100%? Do you see that quite a bit?
I have some guys that are like that. It's funny. We were doing individual meetings, and I think with some players, they get to a point in their career, they're really good players, and but I'd say like, hey, you're like an 85% guy. And sometimes you're like, what do you mean? Like, well, you know what? The other 15% is, prehab before practice.
Hmm.
It's stretching after practice because you're a guy who's going to play a lot of minutes for us. You already got quite a few miles on your tires. So how you take care of your body is that extra 15% of it.
Hmm.
Where that's going to be the thing that causes you to either be an all-American type player or just like an all-conference type player. So sometimes it's like they're living in the margins. But I totally agree with you. It's funny that the Frosty book thing, like nobody can really get their hands on, I think, but
If you
I
go to
learned about
Amazon, it's like a $65 book. And then
I,
my old athletic director from last year had a knockoff copy of it that he let me borrow.
yeah.
So I got to read it. But
You
coach,
know, it's like such a big, I remember that book I mean, I was a huge Don Meyer fan.
yep,
I was like the guy that had all 32 of his like VHS tapes, and I was that dude. And but he
I
would
was
always
that.
talk about that book, like make the big time where you are. And it's like I think the title's pretty self-explanatory, and I was like, I always thought about that when I was a JV high school coach. I was like, I'm going to be the best JV high school coach I can be, absolutely. I'm going to make this like a special experience, that kind of thing. And I think if you have that mindset, whether you're at WPI, Faith, or you end up at, Duke or something like,
Yep.
having that mindset is that travels.
And that makes you have look at everything through a different lens. If I'm trying to make Grapevine Faith Christian School with 334 kids the big time, what does that mean? What does that look like? With the resources we have, how can I care more? How can we get every bit? I can't just go to a parent or a group of parents and say, hey, with $50,000, I think we could do a lot of stuff. That's not going to happen. That doesn't exist. So with what we have, what can I do? And I think that with those lens, you can surprise yourself. And then when you're learning from other people, like there's this coach out in Indiana. I was following him and then his team on Twitter, and that kind of created the relationship through that, just following them. But they hung a bell in their gym, and when a player is doing a shooting game and he gets to a certain number, he gets to go ring the bell. After
Yeah,
a game,
that's
they
great.
get to ring the bell. They get to choose a fan of every game after a win to ring the bell. And I'm like, how much is a bell? It's $20. And you have your maintenance group stick it on the wall.
Priceless.
And that's culture. Yeah, like what the return on that.
Yeah,
But if I'm just thinking about what's next or all of what we don't have, then maybe we miss out.
for sure. For sure.
Love those standards. I think consistency is hard. And going back to the edge piece, I don't think that most players ever get to feel what 100% is like. And I'm even talking about in-game moments, because a lot of my guys know that I played at Baylor, but they don't know that, one, I was very average, and they also don't know how hard it was just to exist there. Like every game, I was playing against people bigger, faster, stronger, better, that I did not belong on the floor. But there is a level of play that even those great players, I feel like a level of effort they're not going to go to. And if I can get there, then that's my equalizer. But it's almost, coach, I've just told my guys, it's a blackout moment of effort where you come back from it and you're like, what just happened? Like, what did I just do? But that's hard to get. You got to be in good shape for sure. You got to be mentally tough to do that, and you got to care a ton. But I do think it's possible, but I don't think players get to that level. Rarely get there.
Do you have your guys read your book? I think that would be good for them.
A few years ago when two things on that. A few years ago when it was redone, after Baylor won the championship, a Christian publisher reached out to me, and because I had self-published it 12 years ago,
Yeah.
which was a cool thing to go through. And I feel like everybody should try to write their own book. Whether you think your life is entertaining or interesting or not, I didn't start out thinking this would be a great book. I just started I read Alan Williams' book called Life at the End of the Bench, which later on was rebranded as Teammates Matter. And I read that book and I thought, this is my same journey. He was a walk-on, I was a scholarship guy, but 39 different dudes walked in and out of that locker room in 4 years. I somehow remained. And so I had to figure, I understood what he was going through. So I started putting my story together. But what ended up was really learning how I had screwed up my life. That's what I realized by putting the story together, where the mistakes had happened, and then how God was able to work through all of those things. But after Baylor wins it, it gets republished, and that was a cool thing. Like to actually have like a real
Yeah.
person do the cover, real people edit it, all this stuff, but they gave me some copies that were meant for just media, so a little bit different than the real thing. And I
Yeah.
had extras, so I gave those to my guys to read. Don't know if they read it or not. And here's one thing I realized, Coach, and players don't care that I played. Like it's a humbling moment. Like maybe Baylor sounds good now. 20 years ago it didn't sound very good. But they don't really care about my stats or playing or whatnot. All they care about is how I show up for them every day. But I do think they
Do you
would.
still go? Do you go like Barkley 'em and
Oh man,
some of those back
Coach,
downs or not?
Coach, I threw my back out a month ago at Walmart, bending over to grab note cards off the bottom shelf. So the answer to that is no. And in fact, I actually am trying to keep this mystery alive of how good could he play? I figure the moment that I try to drop and do something, I'm gonna expose myself and they're going like, Baylor, that guy didn't play
You know
at
what's bad
Baylor.
is if you say like I'm gonna watch this Iverson cross and they go, who's
That's right.
Iverson? You know
Well,
what I mean?
that's
It's
why
like,
it's a Brunson now, right? Like,
I
hey
know, right?
guys, we're gonna Barkley. What? Oh,
That's right.
Brunson. Okay, okay. No, but I do think it would be good for them to read it because maybe they would understand the times where I do feel frustrated with like it guys because I wasn't a like it guy. I was a live it guy, and I so there especially early on in coaching, I alienated a majority of the like it and love it dudes by not being accepting. Oh, what was that? What did I read the other day in the book by Rod Olson, The Legacy Builder? One of the coaches that the main character has to go meet with, he says, man, as leaders, we want to be easy to please, hard to satisfy. Oh, like I heard that. Like I'm the opposite, man. Like hard to please, hard to whatever. Like I wanna from now on, no matter what the player is, I want them to feel like I am pleased with them, but that I'm always wanting like and a big part of the thing was what your language is. He said instead of saying but, like man, hey, way to be here early this morning, but you got to do a little bit more when you're at open gym. Instead of that
Yeah.
but, change it to now. Man, so glad that you came this morning. Now, let's get on the gun. And let's get a couple. Let's be intentional. Now, let's jump in with Brennan, who's leading a group of guys instead of just staying on the side. Right? Like I think
Yeah,
that
it's how you
change in
frame it.
language is
Yeah.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, my father gave out compliments like, very rarely, like, what are this? What's that built in, like hand grenades or something?
What do I
So it's
do?
like,
What do I
yeah,
do?
it's kind of that, and I think so many of us grew up with coaches like that too, and I've certainly like that. I'm more like, so I think one of the things that I struggle with, and I'm driving in my car home is like you want to have this feeling in your program like, well, they're supposed to do that and they're doing it, so I'm just gonna act like they're supposed to do that. And I think you can get into a cycle where you're not rewarding and acknowledging those things, but yet we're the same people as coaches that are always talking about the little things. So if they're doing the little things and we're saying that they're important, we need to do a better job of acknowledging it. And I'm like, guilty as charged over here. I mean, I think that's something that is something that I recognize too much after practice, where I would like to recognize it more before. And I think that's what having great assistant coaches is huge. I mean, I think, I know as like an assistant coach, I think when I was an assistant, I thought like one of the big things to do was, it's not just like cleanup. It's not like, but I think it's playing off the head coach. And I find like the best assistant coaches are guys that can play off the head coach and like, oh, maybe a head coach feels like he's got to be really intense that day. So the assistant coach is gonna, use a different tack. And maybe like the head coach is like, gonna be a little quieter that day, and you have to pick up on that, those kind of things. So I think that's where it's like everyone's kind of working together when you got people working together. Like I love when my assistant coach says like, "Hey, why don't you, give that guy a, pat on the back about something." That's when you got a really great assistant is when they're picking up on that stuff. I think that's key.
Is that something that you're intentional with your assistant coaches in meetings or early on of here's the things that I want you to look for. I want you to be watching them with a closer lens. Maybe you guys take these three, you take the whatever it is, and report back to me when you feel like I need to do something. I need to focus more. Is that something you do with them?
I think it's like no, I wouldn't say it's like it's overly intentional. I want my assistant coaches to be comfortable doing
Mm.
that, and it takes time. I think, if I have guys, I have a lot of times I'll have guys that played for me and they have no hesitation. They'll tell me whatever's on their mind, like really, like and immediately, and they'll know what to do. And then when you bring it in, at our level, there's some turnover assistant coaches. People don't want to stay as a Division III assistant their whole life. So,
Yeah.
my job is to try to develop them and let them, grow and take the next steps. And that's something I take a lot of pride in is developing assistant coaches. But I just feel like as an advice to assistant coaches out there, if I was an assistant coach again, I think I'd be like really good at it because, certainly I got a lot of experience like as a head coach and I kind of can know what they're going through. But I think it's also like, knowing how to play off of somebody and like really reading the room. And I
Yeah.
think the sooner that younger assistant coaches can kind of read that room and like fill in the gaps of the head coach and help the players, I think you really got something special there, when that
Yeah.
happens.
And I think especially with the younger assistant coaches, like what sometimes they're here, they're all stipend coaches and guys that either I knew or played at the high school or college level, but just want to be a part of a team but they have full time jobs, other careers.
Sure.
But I think I do a poor job of being intentional with them. It's more of like, hey, I'm just glad you're here. I'll run the whole show. Just pepper in things when you can. I think that's the vibe I give off probably more than, hey, this is collaborative. Like, let's work together here. So for me, I think a note that I grabbed here from you is I do want to be a little more intentional with them of here are the things I may be teaching the majority because I'm here full time. You guys aren't, and I acknowledge that. I just need you to be speaking the language that we're talking about, not bringing in your own way of blocking out. Like we're going to hit and get. Like that's kind of
Right.
what we do. So I need you to speak that way. Because going back to your terminology talk with alignment,
Yeah, that's it.
when you're going high school down through seventh grade, the more different words are thrown in there, the slower the learning is. But I think I could be better with them of this is what I want you looking for in practice and do not hold back when you're letting me know. I don't think I do a good job with that.
Yeah, and it gets back to, courage. Assistants have to have courage.
Yep.
You want your players to have courage. Your assistant coaches have to have courage. But it's never perfect. It can get you trying to strive for that. But it's also, I think, good for assistant coaches to like know what they're good at. And just like a player, it's like, how do you build confidence? Is you do the stuff that you're good at. and if and you can see it in a young coach when they really know something or have a good grasp of something, the confidence in teaching it, you can see it. And then you see other areas where maybe they're not ready for. So then you know, steer them in that direction of strength. But I think it's so important for us as head coaches to like not just, not, hey, you just work with the guards on the handlers, or you just do this. Because I want them to touch every aspect of the program. So they develop, they learn, and if they do stay, they're getting better,
Yeah.
which is going to help us. And it's like how this whole cycle of success hopefully continues.
That's a great idea about the great and good. And Phil Beckner said he was talking more about players at this time, but you need to be great at what you're good at.
Yeah.
So, but I think coaches or assistant coaches, head coaches were the same way. That TJ Rosine talked about self-awareness being a superpower. Like, do we know what our strengths are as coaches? Do we know our weaknesses? As a head coach, if you know what your weaknesses are, maybe you in the hiring process don't get a mini-me of yourself. Maybe you find people that can fill those roles. Like, I don't feel like I'm a very cool person. I don't have the lingo. I don't listen to the music. But if it's not Christian rap, I don't listen to it really, because that's all we put in our gym here, which before Faith, I never even knew that existed. I didn't know that was a genre, but I don't think I'm very cool. So like bringing in younger coaches that do relate in that way and have fun with them, that don't throw their back out and can play one-on-one with them after practice. Like, I think that's good, but the self-awareness piece, like as coaches, what are we good at? And whatever it is, let's be great at that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think self-awareness for the head coach is important. I mean, we're naturally inclined to, do what, our past experiences of, led us to this point. Like, I mean, I played for a great high school coach. He's a unbelievable defensive coach, like unbelievable. Like I learned, and a lot of the stuff that we do and we've done in our program is because of him. Tom Reiser is his name, and he's a little bit, he's tough. He was, but he learned, great teacher and great defensive mind.
Hmm.
And, so that's how we built our identity on our man-to-man defense. We play a very aggressive man-to-man defense. It's like kind of our identity. But I'm really good at teaching that. Now, when we put in like something else, like, I'm not really good at teaching that. So, hey, learn how to teach this, because I think we're going to do this.
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
way you're empowering your assistant coaches, and you're probably going to get a better return on that teaching because they're invested in learning how to teach that secondary defense or whatever. And I wouldn't be good at it. And plus, it's fun for me because I like to learn. So now I'm learning, I learned something new. Wow, this is good. And I think when you do learn something new, even if you don't always adopt it into your system, you're learning how to play against it, or you're learning how to, compete against it, which I think is really, really important.
One thing, going back to celebrating little things, I'm guilty of that as well. Of if the gym, like one of our pillars is we want to be the most enthusiastic team that we see all year long. Like, we may not win every game, but we can win that battle. We can cheer harder. Every three that's attempted, our whole bench should be standing up, not on the make, but on the attempt. And so we're going to be the most enthusiastic team. But when I feel my gym being that, I don't say too much. I don't celebrate too much. But I do think the celebration piece is huge. And one coach asked this question. I think everybody needs to think about this. Like, how would you coach if you knew this was your last season? If you knew you were either retiring, if you knew you were going somewhere else after this year, what would you do? And like, it's kind of like, there's probably a great country song out there. I know there's a Nickelback song out there called "If Today Was Your Last Day," and I'm a Nickelback fan, and I'm not afraid to say it. Okay, I don't care.
That's courage.
Yeah, yeah. Let's get real here. No, but I think, but if this was your last season, man, you would probably celebrate a lot more. You'd probably be a lot less angry. You'd probably spend more time focusing on fun. And I don't think that fun means that there's a lack of or a void of discipline or of effort or enthusiasm. Like, I think fun can sometimes enhance all of those things. But that's a great question to ask each other. Like, would you do things differently if this was your last season?
Yeah, the other part of that is I read something, you read so many things that you tend to remember who wrote them, who said them, and who wrote. I don't, I'm not as good at that, but I remember reading something a long time ago about every coach should pretend that they just got fired some other place, and even if they're staying at their job, that they're in their job for the first day. So like fire yourself after every year and then rehire yourself, and it's a mindset thing.
Yeah.
And it's something I think we talk to our players all the time about, like a mindset, and I challenge myself like every day with a mindset, no matter what's going on. When I walk into practice, like I've got it, I got that like pop that I need. Um, and I do think what you're talking about is a mindset, and what I'm talking about is a mindset, and we have to fight for that and work for that.
Yeah.
If we're really going to be good at our jobs and good for the kids every single day.
The idea of firing yourself every season, I love that, because I think it'll help keep us from being stagnant,
Yeah, because
not
how do you
growing.
feel when you're walking into your first day at a job?
Yeah.
Like, have that mentality coming into each year. I think is like is a good way to approach things.
And what happened last year may not work with this team. Chris
Sure.
Hill at Jesuit High School in DFW here talked about starting every season over. But how guilty are we of, like, the last day of our season? Guys, we're going to give you a couple days, then we're going to start training again, and it's almost like that day one. It's just an extension of what we just did. You talked about it's over off the court. Like, I think we still hold on to things that players did the year before,
That's
and into our spring, into our summer. And the danger is like, if we look back 5 years from now and we have our practice plans of us doing the same things. Not that that all drills need to be thrown out, but is what we're doing right now the best for this group at this moment in time? I think we have to evaluate that.
Yeah, I think, and that flexibility as a coach, I feel like in our program, we have certain things that, kind of our identity. I mentioned our man-man defense, but I've always felt like offense is more, fluid, in a program. Like, we can't just go out and recruit to a system. We're gonna recruit, try to get the best players, the best fits academically. There's a lot to goes into it at a high academic D3, financial aid, the whole nine yards. So
Yeah.
we can't recruit necessarily to a system offensively. So, I think you have to be a little more varied and a little more flexible offensively. Even like within a game, you could have a small ball group, you could have two posts out there sometimes, whatever. But, I do think, like, having your identity and then having the ability to be flexible enough with other things, and it leads you to sort of like, my thoughts are always like, okay, like, practice is everything, because it's the thing that you're going to do more than anything. We're guaranteed 25 games, but that's it. We're going to have a ton more practices.
Yep.
So what we do every day in practice, is really who we become, and within that, what we emphasize is what we do in practice and who we become. So it's like you just kind of keep breaking it down like that, and then you're hopefully doing the stuff that you're going to do the most in practice.
I think you just stumbled on a dilemma that I think we'll all go through at some point is, do I have a system or do I have concepts? I was a system guy for a long time. It doesn't matter what kids are at Faith. We are going to press constantly, run and gun. I'm going to play 15 kids. Grinnell is there. Those books are right behind me here. There's about 6 of them about the Grinnell system. I personally think Coach Arsenault was a genius and created something different in basketball that, because in the last 50 years, like, what really is different? Like, what's really new? Because there's guys who think that, well, we press and stuff, and then there's guys that can name coaches from 40, 50 years ago that were doing that, right?
Sure.
Dribble drive, all this stuff. Vance Wahlberg, he kind of made it, maybe more popular or taught it, and then Cal took it. But my point is, like, that Grinnell system, I love that. And there's a part of me that it just rings true. And if I was maybe at a small college and could recruit for that, where I told people, listen, it is not about winning here. We are a circus. We are putting on a show. We want this to be something when people leave, they go, what the crap was that? Other teams can't wait to play us because they're going to get to shoot 53s. Like that's kind of but I tried that here, and I kind of tried to, not just straight Grinnell, but a system. The problem with that is if you're so rigid within it, what if it's not the best for your kids? And that's where I think one of a great exercise is to have your friends that coach watch a game film of yours and ask them to tell you what they think. Does this make sense with what I have? Because sometimes I think we're too close to it and we don't really have a good sense of that. Concepts, though, coach, you can adjust those. You can raise and lower those standards or what you're trying to do. So to me, the debate isn't, you have to choose concepts from year to year because you can adjust those.
Yeah, you made the point about the being too close to it. I think one of the things that happens a lot is like we end up we have like a bias towards a player that we stay stuck in a mindset. And I always say to my assistant coaches, if somebody just came in from like dropped down from another planet and they went into our practice, like who would they say are the best, three players on our team?
Yeah.
Because I always feel like sometimes you're sitting there and you're planning things out and like this guy, something he does, it just doesn't, fit, or like you're like, oh, he doesn't take a charge enough or whatever. But you know what? He's one of the best dudes we got. We got to figure it out. We got to
Yeah.
figure it out. And I think that is part of it too, is like in personnel is finding ways to utilize, the resources that you have. Every season I go into it, I try to figure out, it's like a puzzle, like how are we going to win with this team? And
Yeah.
you have assets and you have liabilities, and you got to figure out how to optimize your assets and, hide your liabilities as much as possible. But sometimes we have assets that are right there in our face and we're not seeing it, you know?
And they could work together in different ways, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm a huge fan of this positionless type of playing,
Mm.
because I felt that the numbered system, point guard or naming system, point guards are ones, shooting guards are twos. So using that, it was handcuffing me. What if our best five are three point guards, one forward, and one shooting guard? Well, if I'm just going based on numbers or positions, those three point guards have to get in line with each other. Maybe I could play two of them together. But in a
Mm.
positionless style, it's whatever group of five works. But then that mentality or that idea, then it takes you down some rabbit holes offensively. Well, what do we do? Do we do a system that's based on two bigs or five? So I think I love the idea of having somebody, like, if you could just look, who are our top, like, I like the softball lineup. Who are our top nine? Like,
Mm.
and I don't care what position they play. Who are our top nine? And then depending on how you defensively or offensively play, to me, coach, the fun part is what groups work really well together. Like, and maybe even parts of a game, like late
Yeah.
in the game, man. And we're up 8. Let's have all five be playmakers. All can handle it. What about defensively? Well, maybe we get into our zone at that point, or we just play a different type of man, or I don't know. Like, but I think I want to get away from more and more things that handcuff me from having the best players on the floor the majority of the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think just in my experience, I think coaches tend to look at the game one of two ways. You're trying to either bottom line looking at it from a defensive lens, or you're looking at it from an offensive lens.
Hmm.
The the best teams, are good at both. And I think the best coaches have a way of like ingraining those two things, together where their kind of offense fits their defense and vice versa, and their
Yeah.
personnel is such. And then I think you got to look at your league too, and hey, how are we going to succeed in our league? And it's something that we try to do. How are you going to beat the best teams in your league?
Yeah.
Is I think an important part of what we're trying to do. With in our program and at our level, because we're trying to win the regular season championship. Hopefully win enough games to get an NCAA bid. And then we have the conference tournament too. If we can win that, we get the automatic bid. But you're just trying to put yourself in the right position.
I think that goes right back to alignment, like you talked about with your culture. Does your offense fit your defense? But you could take that a step further. Do all of your concepts fit together? I think that's a great thing to look at. Like, I'm asking them to do this here, but that directly it contradicts what I'm asking them to do here. I'm not talking about the opposites of the game. If their hands are high, throw the ball low. I get that. That makes sense. But that alignment piece with what we choose offensively and defensively to do, Coach, do you think you can have an offensive system that is just completely the opposite of what you do defensively, meaning maybe up tempo, come back and we shrink the floor? Is that possible to do maybe at the college level? What about the high school level?
Yeah, so I look at the game as like styles of play are more about like possessions. So we play an aggressive man-to-man defensive, style, and it's, we've always done that, to try to create, some pace. But over the last few years, I just happen to have like a bigger team than I've ever had. We've had two posts a lot. Now we don't have that anymore, and so we still played a very aggressive, but maybe didn't like push the pace as much as we've had in the past, and we kind of like slowed down to make sure we like featured those guys as much as
Yeah.
possible, because so that was the best way for us to win. So I think that that's the idea. To me, it's like it's not so much what exactly you're going to do, but it's how does it fit your guys? And it goes back to playing to your strengths, for the
Yeah.
players to play to their strengths. Like, for those teams like the race and space, like like you run, wouldn't have worked because those two guys weren't 3-point shooters and they're just
Yeah.
big, strong dudes, you know what I mean? So it wouldn't really work. But now maybe that type of stuff is, fits us better and, more like in line with what we've done in the past. So I think the way to look at coaching a lot is like, how do we make this group succeed rather than like, what do we want? Who am I on offense as a coach? And that's how I want to play no matter
Yeah.
what. And who
Forcing
am I
them
on
into
defense?
that mold. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you have like a bottom line, like your bottom line is like you're gonna play fast and you're gonna shoot threes and you're gonna get layups and threes. And that fits well with, an aggressive, pressing or aggressive man-to-man style. I don't know if you were going back into like sitting in a 2-3 zone and the other team had to take like a long time to get a shot off, if that necessarily like fits.
Yeah.
But situationally,
Yeah.
I think it can be very powerful because you're up eight with, 2.5 minutes left and they need to score fast now and they got to make six passes before they can get one off, and now you're still racing to get a layup. But if you don't have anything, now you know how to space the court and
Yeah.
you know how to play in that space and get a shot at the end of the clock, with an advantage. That then it fits. It's just very situational to me.
Coach, before I let you go, this is going to be the speed round. These are quick questions. First thing that pops in your head, you just blurt it out. Can't wait for this because of the conversations I've got to have with you. So are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Favorite ice cream flavor?
Anything with like peanut butter.
Oh, good call. Chocolate peanut butter. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. Greatest shooter of all time.
It's a good one. Geez, I knew this was coming too. Okay. I mean, I think for me, it's like Steph, Bird, which I would love to have seen what Bird's shooting percentages would have been from three if that was more of
Mm,
a featured shot. But
yeah,
I mean, I'd say Steph and Bird.
yeah, I love that. Random question: Chris Heron, and he's up from around that
Yeah.
Boston area. I loved his documentary. Um, and his book, I think, Basketball Junkie. I haven't read it, but love the documentary, the 30 for 30. Do you remember the name of that?
No, I don't, but
Yeah.
I know I've met him a couple times. He's
Okay.
an incredible dude.
Yeah, I didn't know if like your paths in basketball ever crossed or anything, and
His
that just kind of popped in my
brother,
head. Yeah.
his brother Mike, so he played out at Durfee High School,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
like a big, like, they were like it was like a small town, but like all ballers. Like it was kind of like the Hoosiers of like
Yeah.
Massachusetts. And his brother Mike was this big, strong, like 6'5" guy who he was like a really, really exceptional high school player. I can't remember where he went, but I don't think it worked out. But then Chris was
He
this
was in the
dynamic.
documentary though. I remember
Yeah,
him. Yeah.
yeah. Chris was this dynamic athlete, like, he was a baller and really took the whole region by storm. He was so good. And then, obviously his story, but he does a lot of great work
Yeah.
all around the country, but I know especially in here, talking about his, addiction and,
Yep.
helping kids. He goes to a lot of schools and speaks. I came in contact with him a couple times where he was working some guys out in Rhode Island area and a couple guys that were recruiting. And, he was a great, great mentor for those kids and incredible story.
Yeah. There's a new question. Do you stand up or sit down during games?
Yeah, I think I do it by feel. I don't stand up the whole time, and I don't sit the whole time. There's a Before I got the WPI job, I was like the full-time assistant at St. Anselm College's Division II school out here for like 2.5 weeks in July recruiting period. The head coach there is a great coach, Keith Dixon. He just retired, and he literally can sit on the bench. I mean, he's such a play. Their players play with such confidence there,
Yeah.
and they just have a style that they play. And he will sit there the entire game and not get up. He will get up to yell at an official, but but he had just this like great like composure. Now I like to be up and down a little bit more than
Yeah.
that, sure.
Tyler Costin had a great story about Popovich and how if somebody who didn't know basketball was to watch Popovich during a game, they would think this guy doesn't care. He's not involved. He's not. He could rather be anywhere else. But Tyler had this whole thing about great coaches don't feel like they have to put on a show or do things during a game just to show that they care, that they can sit there. I think it all goes back to the amount of work that you do in practice. But then Steve Kerr talked about how he stands and sits at random times throughout the game, kind of like you, so that there's no pattern to it. I stand a lot. I've watched on film that I sit when we miss shots that I really want them to make. And coach, that is completely against what we teach, which is it's not that you have to make it, it's that you have to take it. But my body language says that I'm actually upset because I go sit down. And so just something to think about, but I like to be more like you.
Nice, nice.
Top three dinner guests across any time period.
Oof. Yeah, so I mean, I really would love to. I I'm a kind of a big football fan too, but I love that like Bill Parcells, Bobby Knight,
Oh man,
and like
those two together.
Belichick. Like something about that crew. Even though they're football guys and not basketball guys, there's something about that crew that I would love to sit down with. Because I think like, Bobby Knight was such a big part of basketball.
Yeah,
His like great teacher. Obviously, there's some people have, different opinions about Coach Knight, but I mean, I think we all learned as young coaches like so much about basketball, how to run a
yeah,
practice, how motion offense is such a prevalent part of the game for so long. And now it's gone with this very little screening and cutting now and off-ball screening,
Yeah.
so it's funny. But and then Belichick, because he's such an enigma, especially being in New England. But I know he's got a really good sense of humor because I know some people that know him,
Yeah.
and a big personality. And then Parcells is just, to me, like he was here for a while as the Patriots coach, and I've always enjoyed like his kind of approach and like his humor and that kind of thing. So I think that'd be a fun crew.
Best basketball movie of all time.
Yeah, I know you asked this question, and there was a great movie. I was a little kid when it came out. When it came out, it was like I think it's with Robbie Benson called One on
Yeah.
One.
Yep.
And I remember that when I was listening to your podcast and about that, and I hadn't thought about that in a long time, and it was a great story about like the young player, like getting to school and getting the snot beat out of him a little bit and going through
Yeah.
some problems, and I thought it was a cool story.
A lot of people have brought that one up. Sadly,
Oh, really?
I still haven't watched it, and that's my fault. I need to see that. A couple more for high school. Shot clock or no shot clock. Keep in mind, I'm in Texas where there isn't one.
Yeah, I think it's a travesty. I mean, there has to be a shot clock. We took our team to Europe in May, and we practiced with a 24-second shot clock and the 8-second backcourt, and it was great. It was
Yeah.
great. I mean, we're all talking about quick decisions, and it makes you make quick decisions. I mean, I think 30 would be fine, obviously, for high school, but there has to be a shot clock.
I appreciate that. Okay, new question. If a player gets two fouls in the first half, do they sit the rest of the half?
Not as like a hard fast rule. That's one like it's kind of like when to call timeouts. I think it's I really think it's how smart the kid is, what kind of who he's guarding, like
Trust.
those kind
Yeah.
of things. Trust for sure, experience. Like there's some guys on our team if they got too early, yeah, I'm taking them. I'm taking them. You know, and then there's other guys I let them play with three.
Yeah.
You know.
Favorite holiday?
I really like Memorial Day. I like it's like like it's after hoops and before like summer's full in gear. I really love the spring is great out here. That time for I know that's considered summer, but it's a really nice time around here.
Awesome. What book would you give someone?
Yeah, I think there's two books that I continually go back to, and it's Seven Habits of Highly Successful People, which is like a
Yeah.
classic,
Yeah.
and the Atomic Habits book. I think those two are something that there's so much great. Like, I mean, the Seven Habits. I think we all use those every single day, even if we don't know it. We're
Yeah.
we're we're thinking that way, and it helps you like align with what is most important, first things first, begin with the end in mind, being proactive, thinking win-win, all that stuff is really, really important in my job. So I resonates with me.
Last one, coach, probably most important in basketball as a player. Who's the GOAT?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jordan's the best player I've seen. And I think some of that is like positionally, like I think he's the
Sure.
most versatile, you know. But yeah, I think he's the GOAT.
Coach, this was so enjoyable. Gave me over an hour and a half of your time, and just from getting to speak with you this last few months and learning more about you here in your program, man, just thankful for what you do and how many people you've been able to influence over the years, and just really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Matt. I gotta tell you, like I was saying, there's so much information out there, and I hope all the coaches learn about your podcast. I know you're doing pretty well.
Coach, if anybody had any questions about, because you did mention some X's and O's stuff, like what would be a good way for them to reach out to you?
Oh, I love to talk basketball. I love to help out coaches, and I love to learn. So I'd be asking them coaches too, but they can, email me at cbartley@wpi.edu is probably the best thing. I'm always checking my email, and hopefully I'll get right back to you.
And Coach, and again, thank you so much for giving up your time here.
All right, thanks, Matt. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi Podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.